Today's story is not about beauty, wealth, or pride. It is about the girl no one noticed and the man who saw everything. In a desperate time, a family made a choice that changed two lives forever. One sister was offered for survival. Another was forgotten, until a quiet native man looked past appearances and chose with his heart. This is a story of dignity, hidden worth, and a love that began where the world refused to look. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The frontier settlement clung to the land like a tired prayer. Wooden cabins leaned against the wind, their walls thin, their roofs patched too many times to count. Hunger lived openly here, sat beside families at the table, slept beside them at night. Hope was rationed carefully like flour. In one such cabin lived the Hale family, burdened by debt and a winter that promised to be cruel. They had two daughters. Elena was the kind of beauty that drew eyes without effort. Her laughter filled rooms. Men lingered longer when she spoke. She had learned early that the world noticed her, and she expected it to keep doing so. Mara, on the other hand, learned the opposite lesson. Mara was quiet, plain by the town's standards, her hair always pulled back, her dresses worn thin, not from fashion but from use. She moved softly through rooms, as if afraid to disturb the air. If Elena was sunlight, Mara was the shadow beneath the table, present, necessary, unseen. From the time she could walk, Mara worked. She fetched water before dawn, chopped vegetables with numb fingers, stitched torn clothes until her eyes burned. Praise never followed her effort. It was expected. Invisible labor never earned gratitude. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" her mother once said. Not cruelly, just tired. Mara nodded and worked harder. At night she lay awake, listening to her parents whisper near the dying fire. "Elena will marry well," her father said. "She has a future." "And Mara?" her mother asked, hesitating. A pause. Then words that would carve themselves into Mara's bones forever. "She is kind, but kindness does not feed a family." Mara lay still, staring into the dark, her chest tight. She did not cry. She had learned that tears solved nothing. Instead, she learned silence. Weeks later, desperation arrived wearing boots and purpose. A respected native man rode into the settlement, his presence calm, his posture unyielding. His name was Awan. He carried no weapons openly, yet no one doubted his strength. He spoke little, but when he did, people listened. He came with an offer: protection for the settlement's edge, access to hunting grounds, food trade through the coming winter. In return, marriage. The news spread like fire. Families whispered, calculated, hoped. The Hale parents looked at Elena. Of course they did. Mara stood in the corner, hands folded, already understanding her place in the decision. She was not angry. Anger required expectation. She had none. That night, as the wind rattled the cabin walls, Mara sat alone outside, staring at the stars. She did not dream of love. She did not dream of escape. She only wondered, quietly, painfully, what does it feel like to be chosen? Behind her, the future shifted, and for the first time in her life, Mara stood unknowingly at the edge of a story that would finally see her. The Hale family scrubbed their cabin cleaner than it had ever been. The table was wiped smooth. The cracked plates were turned so their broken edges faced away. Elena brushed her hair until it shone, tying a ribbon she had saved for special moments. Her mother adjusted her dress again and again, as if fabric alone could secure their future. Mara stood near the door, hands folded, already invisible. When Awan entered the cabin, the air changed. He did not look impressed, nor disappointed. He looked deliberate. His eyes moved slowly, taking in the space, the people, the hunger that clung to the walls. He carried himself like a man who did not rush decisions. The father cleared his throat. "You honor us with your visit." Awan nodded once. "I will speak plainly." He did. He explained the offer without ornament: protection for the settlement's edge, shared hunting routes, winter provisions. In return, he would take a wife, not as a servant, not as a trophy, as a partner. The mother's breath caught. The father's eyes gleamed with relief. Elena smiled, then stiffened. The reality settled too fast. A life away from her friends, from attention, from choice. A stranger's land, a stranger's customs. Panic rose in her chest. When Awan's gaze finally moved toward her, Elena's composure shattered. She stood suddenly, breath uneven. I cannot," she said. Her parents stared at her in disbelief. "I can't leave," Elena continued, voice trembling. "I don't belong out there. I'm not meant for that life." Her mother hissed, "Elena, stop." But desperation makes people reckless. Elena dropped to her knees. The room froze. She turned not to her parents, but to Awan, eyes wet, pride gone. "Please," she begged, "take my sister instead." The words echoed like a slap. Everyone turned. Mara's heart slammed violently against her ribs. For a moment, she didn't understand what had been said. Then, it landed, heavy and humiliating. She felt exposed, offered, traded. Her parents did not protest, not immediately. Mara's mother glanced at her, then at Awan, calculation flickering behind her eyes. "She is obedient," her mother said weakly. "She works hard." Mara's stomach twisted. Awan said nothing. He did not look at Elena still kneeling. He did not look at the parents justifying the exchange. He looked at Mara, not in appraisal, not in dismissal, in recognition. For the first time in her life, Mara felt seen, not as a burden, not as a solution, but as a person. Her breath caught. She stared at the floor, shame burning her cheeks. "Of course, this is how it happens," she thought. "Even now I am chosen only because someone else refuses." Her hands trembled. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Elena sobbed quietly, relief already creeping into her shoulders. Mara stood frozen, heart pounding, mind screaming. This was not a proposal. It was a transaction, and she was the currency. Awan finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I will not accept a choice made out of fear." The room held its breath. Then he added, turning fully toward Mara, "I will speak to her." Mara's head snapped up. Her parents gasped. Elena looked up in confusion. Awan took a single step closer to Mara, lowering himself slightly, so his eyes met hers, not above, not below. In that moment, everything shifted. For the first time in her life, Mara was not being offered. She was being asked. The cabin felt smaller when Awan asked for a moment alone with Mara. Not alone in secrecy, alone in respect. "Here," her father said quickly, gesturing toward the far side of the room, already uneasy. "She will answer." Mara's legs felt heavy as she stepped forward. Every eye followed her, some curious, some relieved, some embarrassed. She kept her gaze lowered, afraid that if she looked at any of them, she would disappear back into the shape they expected. Awan did not rush her. He waited until the noise of shifting chairs and shallow breaths settled. Then he spoke, not loudly but clearly enough that everyone could hear. "I will ask you one thing," he said to Mara, "and only you may answer." Her throat tightened. She nodded. He did not ask about her beauty. He did not ask if she could cook, obey, or endure hardship. He did not ask what she could give. He asked simply, "Do you want this?" The word struck her harder than any insult ever had. No one had ever asked her what she wanted. Her parents stiffened. Elena's head snapped up. The room seemed to tilt. Mara opened her mouth, and nothing came out. Want. The word felt foreign, dangerous. She searched herself desperately. What did she want? To stay, to leave, to matter? Her voice trembled when it finally came. I don't know how to want things, she admitted quietly. Awan did not interrupt. She swallowed. If it helps my family, she said, forcing the words through the knot in her chest, I will go. The room exhaled. Relief, not kindness. Awan's eyes darkened, not with anger, but understanding. He turned slowly toward the Hale parents. I did not ask what would help you, he said calmly. I asked what she wants. Silence fell again, this time heavier. Then he faced them fully and said the words that changed everything. I choose her. Elena's shoulders sagged with relief, and guilt flickered across her face before she looked away. Mara felt something strange rise in her chest. Fear, yes, but also dignity, not because she had been selected, but because she had been seen. Her mother stepped forward, suddenly uncertain. She is quiet, she said, as if apologizing. Awan nodded. So is the earth before it feeds us. No one spoke after that. The agreement was made without ceremony. No embrace, no celebration, just the scratching of ink, the finality of a decision no one had expected to land this way. That night, Mara packed her things. There wasn't much. A spare dress, a small bundle of thread, a knife with a cracked handle she'd fixed herself. She paused once, looking around the room she had worked in, slept in, disappeared in. No one came to stop her. Her mother stood in the doorway, unsure. Elena hovered behind her, unable to meet Mara's eyes. Mara did not ask for a farewell. She stepped outside into the cool dusk, heart pounding, hands shaking. Awan waited near his horse, giving her space. As she passed the threshold, something inside her closed quietly, not with bitterness, but with finality. She did not look back, because for the first time in her life, the road ahead, unknown and frightening, felt more honest than the place she was leaving behind. And the girl no one wanted walked forward with her head held just a little higher. There was no celebration, no music, no flowers, no crowd pressing close to witness the joining of two lives. The marriage between Mara and Awan happened at dawn, beneath a pale sky that held neither promise nor threat, only stillness. Two elders stood as witnesses. Words were spoken simply. Hands were joined without ceremony. And then it was done. Mara expected something afterward, a command, a direction, a test she might fail. Instead, Awan stepped back and said, You may rest. The journey was long. That was all. His home sat at the edge of the land, where plains met trees. It was solid, carefully built, not grand but intentional. When they arrived, Awan showed her the space quietly. This is yours, he said, gesturing to a small adjoining room. You will have privacy here. Mara froze. My own space? He nodded. Every person needs a place where they are not watched. No one had ever offered her that. She slept poorly the first nights, waking at every sound, bracing for anger or demand. None came. Awan rose early, worked, returned, and spoke to her with steady courtesy. Did you eat? Is the fire warm enough? If you need something, say so. She didn't know how to answer questions that assumed her comfort mattered. Days passed. Still, no expectations were placed upon her beyond what she chose to do herself. When she cooked, he thanked her. When she worked the garden, he worked beside her, not overseeing, not correcting. One evening, unable to hold her confusion any longer, Mara spoke. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked quietly, eyes fixed on the fire. Awan did not look surprised. "Why wouldn't I be?" She hesitated. "I was second choice." He turned to her then, fully. "You were not chosen because you were unwanted." She looked up, heart racing. "You were chosen," he continued, voice calm and deliberate, "because you were unseen." The words struck her deeper than cruelty ever had. "I saw how they spoke over you," he said. "How decisions were made around you, not with you. I saw how you stood without asking for anything." Mara's hands clenched in her lap. "That doesn't make me special." "No," he agreed gently. "It makes you human." Something loosened inside her chest, slowly, carefully. That night, for the first time in her life, Mara slept without bracing herself. She woke to sunlight instead of dread. Safety, she learned, was not loud. It did not announce itself. It arrived quietly, through respect, through patience, through being allowed to exist without performance. Weeks passed. Mara began to hum again, softly while working. She fixed broken hinges, mended tools, restored small things no one else noticed. Awan watched, not possessively, but with growing attentiveness. "You mend things," he said once. She shrugged. "Broken doesn't mean useless." He smiled, not with charm but understanding. For the first time, Mara felt something she could not name. Not love, not yet, but peace. And peace, she realized, was something she had never been taught to expect. Kindness, Mara learned, could be unsettling. It arrived without warning and stayed without demanding payment. It did not keep score. It did not remind her of what she owed. And because of that, it made her uneasy in ways cruelty never had. Days settled into a rhythm. Mara rose early, not because she was told to, but because her body was trained for it. She cooked simply, kept the home warm, repaired what time and weather wore down. When something broke, she fixed it quietly. When something was missing, she found a way. Awan noticed everything, not with praise that embarrassed her, but with attention that felt steady. He noticed how she tightened loose bindings before storms, how she listened fully when others spoke, never interrupting, how she left the last piece of food untouched, unless offered. One evening, as she repaired a cracked stool, he asked, "Where did you learn to mend like that?" She didn't look up. "When things broke, no one replaced them." He nodded. "So you learned to make them last." She hesitated. "I learned not to ask." The words surprised them both. Silence followed, not awkward but thoughtful. At night, Mara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind restless. Why would someone choose me again? Not out of desperation this time, not as a replacement. The question frightened her more than rejection ever had. Weeks passed. The seasons shifted. Warm days cooled suddenly, and with the change came illness. Awan returned one evening pale, his steps uneven. By nightfall, fever took him. His breath grew shallow. His skin burned beneath Mara's touch. Panic surged, but she swallowed it. She had been afraid her whole life. Fear would not help him now. She worked through the night, cooling cloths, measured water, quiet murmurs when pain twisted his face. She spoke to him even when he drifted in and out, anchoring him to the present. "You are not alone," she whispered. "I'm here." At dawn, his fever broke. Awan woke to find Mara asleep and at his side, slumped in the chair, her fingers still loosely holding his wrist, as if afraid he might vanish. When he stirred, she woke instantly. "Don't move," she said, voice hoarse. "You need rest." He studied her exhaustion. the worry she hadn't tried to hide. You stayed, he murmured. She nodded. Of course. Why? He asked quietly. The question landed heavily. Because you matter, she said simply. Then, startled by her own honesty, she added, and because I wanted to. Something shifted in his expression, something deep and careful. As he recovered over the following days, he watched her more closely now, not with distance, with tenderness. You never treat care like a duty, he said once. You treat it like a choice. Mara paused. No one ever chose me. I don't take choosing lightly. That night, as she lay awake listening to his steady breathing, the truth surfaced gently, but unmistakably. She had fallen in love, not with grand gestures, not with promises, but with the way he gave her space without abandoning her, with the way he saw her labor and named it, with the way he was ill and trusted her completely. Love terrified her, because love meant risk, and risk meant believing she was worthy of staying. As dawn crept in, Mara pressed her hand to her chest and whispered into the quiet, Please, let this be real. Outside, the land stretched wide and silent. Inside, a heart that had lived unseen for so long had finally begun to believe it might be home. The night was quiet, in a way that felt intentional, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Awan's strength returned slowly. By the third evening after the fever broke, he was able to sit beside the fire again, wrapped in a blanket, the flames reflecting softly in his eyes. Mara moved about the cabin quietly, careful not to disturb him, though her body still carried the ache of sleepless nights. Sit, he said gently, noticing her exhaustion. She hesitated. Old habits urged her to keep moving, to remain useful. But she listened. They sat together in silence for a long moment, the fire snapping between them. Then Awan spoke, his voice low, thoughtful. When I was ill, he said, I dreamed of my mother. Mara looked up, surprised. She was like you, he continued, quiet, easily overlooked. People spoke around her, not to her. His jaw tightened. She carried more than anyone ever knew. Mara felt something tighten in her chest. She married young, he said. She worked, endured, gave everything she had. And when she died, she believed she had never been enough, that her life was small. He stared into the fire. That belief killed her long before her body failed. Mara's breath caught. I promised myself, Awan said, voice steady but heavy, that if I ever had the power to choose, I would never pass that pain forward. The room felt suddenly too small. That is why I chose you, he said quietly, not because you were willing to sacrifice yourself, but because you deserved someone who would not ask you to. The words broke something open inside her. Mara's hands began to shake. She tried to steady them, but years of restraint finally collapsed under the weight of being seen. I thought, she whispered, that I was only useful. Her voice cracked. She pressed her fingers into her skirt, as if anchoring herself to the moment. I thought love was something other people received, she said, tears spilling freely now. I learned to work harder, to speak less, to disappear. I thought that was my value. Awan turned toward her fully. You were never meant to disappear, he said firmly. She covered her face, shoulders trembling, as years of rejection poured out of her. Not loud, not dramatic, but raw and honest. I was afraid, she admitted, that if I believed you chose me, and I was wrong, I wouldn't survive it. Awan reached for her hands, grounding her. You aren't surviving anymore, he said softly. You are living. She looked at him then, really looked, and the truth rose undeniable in her chest. She loved him, not the safety alone, not the dignity. Him, the man who asked her what she wanted, the man who gave without conditions, the man who saw her wounds and did not flinch. "I love you," she said, the words trembling but sure. Awan's breath caught. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he rested his forehead against hers. "Then you are home," he said quietly. They stayed that way for a long time, two people unlearning pain together. Later that night, as Mara lay awake beside him, the fear returned briefly, not of loss, but of the past waiting to test her. She knew what remained: the town, her family, the version of herself they still remembered. Soon she would have to face them. And when she did, she would need to decide something far more difficult than obedience or sacrifice. She would need to decide whether she truly believed she belonged here. The town looked smaller than Mara remembered. The buildings were the same: crooked fences, weather-beaten doors, dust pressed into every crack. But something had shifted, or perhaps she had. They came for supplies at first light. Awan walked beside her, unhurried, his presence steady as the ground beneath her feet. Mara's heart pounded anyway. Every step closer to the town felt like walking back into a former life she had shed but not yet buried. The first whisper reached her before the first greeting. "That's her. The quiet one." Why did he choose her? Mara's shoulders tensed instinctively. Old habits stirred. Lower your eyes, make yourself smaller, disappear. Awan noticed. He slowed, matching her breath, and spoke softly without looking at her. "You do not owe them anything." She nodded, though her throat tightened. They entered the trading post. The owner paused mid-motion, surprise flickering across his face. His eyes moved from Awan's composed strength to Mara's calm posture, no longer folded inward, no longer apologetic. "You've changed," he said awkwardly. Mara met his gaze. "I was always here." Outside, the Hale family stood near their old cabin. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Her father stared as if seeing a ghost. And Elena's eyes lingered too long, searching, measuring. Relief had once lived on her sister's face when Mara left. Now something else lived there. Regret. "You look, well," her mother said uncertainly. Mara inclined her head politely. Not distant, not eager, simply present. Elena stepped forward, voice soft. "I didn't think," she stopped. "I didn't know it would be like this." Mara studied her sister, beautiful, still desired, still centered in the world's gaze, and realized something startling. Elena had never been stronger than her, only louder. Before Mara could answer, a voice rose from the gathering crowd. Why would he choose her? The question was not cruel. It was confused, honest in its ignorance. Mara felt the familiar sting, then felt Awan's hand find hers. He stepped forward, his voice carrying easily across the square. "Because she is my home." Silence followed, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that rearranges things. "She listens without fear," he continued. "She gives without erasing herself. She stands without asking permission. I did not rescue her. I recognized her." He turned to Mara then, not as a shield, but as a partner. "And I will choose her every day." Mara's breath caught. For a moment the old voice whispered, "Don't believe it. Don't trust it." Then another voice, quieter, truer, answered, "You are here. You are standing. You are chosen." She squeezed Awan's hand. Elena looked away first. Later, as they prepared to leave, Mara paused near the edge of town. She looked once, just once, at the place that had taught her to be invisible. She felt no anger, only distance. On the road home, She finally spoke what had been trembling inside her. I used to think belonging was something I had to earn. Awan glanced at her. And now? She smiled, small but certain. Now, I think it's something I'm allowed to accept. Ahead, the land opened wide and familiar. Behind her, the past grew quiet. And for the first time, Mara believed, not because someone told her, but because she felt it deep and steady. She belonged. Home did not arrive all at once. It came quietly, through mornings that began without fear, through evenings where silence felt full instead of empty, through the steady knowledge that nothing needed to be proven anymore. Mara noticed it one morning as she stood outside, watching the sun lift itself over the plains. The light touched everything evenly: the grass, the earth, the home she now lived in. No corner was hidden, no shadow was punished. For the first time, she did not brace herself for the day. Inside, Awan was repairing a worn saddle strap. He looked up when he sensed her presence. "You're smiling," he said. She seemed surprised by it herself. "I think," she answered slowly, "I finally believe I'm allowed to be happy." He set the strap aside and joined her. They stood shoulder to shoulder, not speaking. They had learned that love did not always need words to confirm itself. Their marriage deepened, not through dramatic declarations, but through equality. Decisions were shared. Work was chosen, not assigned. When Mara spoke, she was listened to, not indulgently, not proudly, but seriously, as an equal. One evening, she asked the question that had lived quietly in her for months. "If I had said no that day," she said, eyes on the fire, "would you have walked away?" Awan answered without hesitation, "Yes." She turned, startled. "I wanted a partner," he said, "not a sacrifice." Her chest tightened, not with fear but with relief. In time, laughter returned to her easily. She sang while working now, not softly, not cautiously, but freely. The sound carried across the land, and Awan often paused just to listen. "You sound like someone who knows where she belongs," he told her once. She smiled. "I do." When travelers passed through, they noticed it too. Not the house, not the land, but the way Mara moved within her life, grounded, unapologetic, at peace. She was no longer the forgotten girl. She was not someone's replacement. She was not a bargain. She was chosen. And more importantly, she chose herself. One night, as they lay beneath the wide sky, Mara spoke words she had never thought she would say without shame. "I used to believe the world was right about me." Awan turned to her. "And now, I know it was wrong," she said simply. "It just didn't know how to see." He took her hand, pressing it to his chest. "You are the truest home I've ever known." Mara closed her eyes, not because she was afraid to look, but because she no longer needed to search. The past did not vanish. It simply lost its power. She carried it differently now, not as a wound, but as proof. Proof that worth does not announce itself, that love does not always arrive where the world expects it, that the quietest hearts often hold the deepest strength. And somewhere, in a small frontier town, a girl once overlooked had become a woman fully seen, not by crowds, not by approval, but by love freely given and freely received. Sometimes the world overlooks its greatest treasures, not because they are lacking, but because they are quiet. And sometimes, love does not rescue us. It teaches us how to finally come home to ourselves.